Well, my name is Hilda O'Clair. My maiden name was Gates. My daddy was William Solon Gates. He was from Clark County, born in Fulton, Alabama. My mother was Merle Currington Gates, and her parents were John and Maud Currington. She was born in Oakland. And I never knew my grandparents on my daddy's side. They were dead a long time before I was even born. But I was born in Mobile, and then I grew up in the Pritchard area. But I always went to school in Chickasaw, where my mother taught school. She was a teacher. And then when I got to the 7th grade, I wanted to go to Pritchard Junior High School because it was so close to where I lived. It was just real close. And I could walk and go home for lunch, and my daddy retired the same year, and sometimes he was there at lunch, sometimes he wasn't. But I went on to Viagra High School and graduated in 1962, and went 1 year to college, to Howard College in Birmingham. And I really didn't know what I wanted to do because I had just turned 17 in January before I graduated in May. So I thought I'd just take basic courses and decide what I wanted to do. I started doing office work for one of the professors there, and decided I liked the typing, filing, general office work, so I thought that I would get into that. And
when were you born?
oh, when was I born? January the 19th, 1945, so I just turned 70 this past January.
Let's see. So you grew up in Chickasaw?
Pritchard.
Pritchard.
I went to elementary school through the 6th grade in Chickasaw. My mother was a teacher, and I just went to school where she taught.
Do you still have that school bell she has?
Yes, I do. I've got a couple of them. One's kind of a homemade type handle, and the other one was a bought one, I guess, that she used way back years ago. But,
are you going to let me have one?
maybe. You may have both of them one day. Who knows?
Do you have a favorite memory from growing up?
Yeah, I have a couple of them. One, it was just me, my mother, and my daddy. So a lot of, some Fridays, we would go to downtown Mobile after school, and they would go to the bank if they needed to. Then we would go to Marston's cafeteria and eat. And that was always seemed special to me because the waiters were black men who dressed up formally with tie coat and everything, shiny black shoes, and they had white linen napkins, and they were so dedicated to being a waiter. They couldn't do enough for you, made you feel like a king or queen. And then we'd go to the Bienville Park and usually buy some peanuts and feed the pigeons, and it was a very relaxed time, something they enjoyed doing and I enjoyed too. And another favorite memory of mine, though, is I wanted a bicycle a long time before I got it. And I had a parakeet for years, I don't know how many years. And it was very attached to me. When it was out of his cage, he would spend a lot of time on my shoulder or either on my dresser that had a little perch light that he could sit on, or she, it was a she. But one day I went out to ride my bicycle and I forgot that the parakeet was on my shoulder. So I went riding all around the community, and before I got back home, all of a sudden the parakeet flew off my shoulder, and I realized she was back there. And we had clipped her wings just so she couldn't fly high. Otherwise, we probably would have never caught her. But I did catch her, and she lived, I don't know how much longer, but a long time. So those are my, oh, and I can remember when I was really little, me and the little neighbor kid would play up under the house in the dirt, dig in the dirt, and make mud pies, and it was so cool under there in the summer, and I didn't want to come out when my mother called me. I can remember that. So those are some of my favorite memories.
Where'd you grow up going to church?
When I was 2 weeks old, my mother took me to church, and she attended Plateau Church of Christ, and went there for years.
Who was the preacher?
V.P. Black. Great man.
What was I don't know what to ask. Let me check. I can edit this out. Was there a good or favorite memory you have of your parents growing up?
Well, that was
Christmas
it.
time?
Oh, around Christmas time? Well, like I said, I never knew my daddy's mother and daddy, but my mother's mother and daddy, she seemed like that whole family thought so much of them and each other that they always liked to get together as much as they could, even though they were scattered here, yonder, and there. But I remember Christmases when we'd go up there, and my granddaddy would cut down a Christmas tree out of the woods, bring it back, and he'd put it in a bucket of dirt. And my grandmother had these Christmas lights that were bubble lights, and I thought those were the prettiest lights I ever saw. And then we'd decorate it and put the ornaments, and then you always had to have the icicles. And here we usually had a bunch of cousins around, and the boy cousins would always just throw handfuls on there. So us girls would get kind of aggravated with them, but we'd straighten it up, and that was the prettiest tree, I thought. But my granddaddy and grandmother had a long dining table, and I don't know how we all got to that table, but it seems like we did. And the table would just be full of food and pies and cakes and everything good, and it was just a happy, happy time getting together with all the cousins and aunts and uncles and sitting out on their porch and in their swing and drinking water from the well. It was cold water. It was so good, drinking from a dipper. And my granddaddy grew the best watermelons ever, and he'd bring up watermelons in the summertime, and they were so sweet. We all loved them.
Who's the granddaddy? John?
John Carrington, yes.
Did you talk about your daddy?
My daddy?
Yeah.
Well, he was a lot older than my mother, but the way they met...
What's his name?
William Solon Gates. I think I already said that, but anyway.
Oh.
The way they met, it was during the war. They had a lot of job openings at the shipyard in Mobile, and they needed people to come work on the ships, and they paid good money, and a lot of people left their professions and went to Mobile to work in the shipyard. And so my daddy his kids were raised and had moved down this way, and so he left his hometown and went to Mobile. And my mother was a teacher, but she left her profession temporarily to work at the shipyard also. So I don't know if they worked in the same department, but anyway, they met and were married in 1942, I think it was. And I was the only child of my mother, but my daddy had, of course, a grown family and grown grandkids, actually, by the time I was born.
When was he born?
We're not sure. I think we have November 21st, 1884 on his grave, or it may be 1882. He claimed he didn't know for sure, and he claimed that the courthouse in Clark County had burnt, and there was no way for him to find out for sure. But that's about all I know of that.
All right. Let's see. How did you and Daddy meet?
Well, my youngest half sister's son is my age, and he and Jimmy were friends when they were growing up in high school or whatever, and lived close together. So they palled around. And one day I had to go in Chickasaw drugstore on an errand for my mother, and Jackie was my nephew, was in there with Jimmy. And so I just said a few words and left, and then undoubtedly Jackie gave Jimmy my phone number, and so he started calling me, and we met through him, through my nephew.
That?
When?
19.
That was in 1961, I think. I was in college, and I'd come home for the Thanksgiving holidays at that time.
What was your profession?
Well, I did a lot of general office work, which I liked. For a while, I had 2 or 3 little jobs, and then I went to work for a bank, and then went to work for another bank, which ended up being Regions Bank, and I worked there for 28 years. I did various jobs, mostly teller. As long as I was in Mobile, it was always part-time. When I went to Gadsden, it was full-time. And when I left there, I was head teller of the Glencoe branch. I worked for about 2.5 years in Birmingham at the Operations Center. But then when I moved to Robertsdale, where we live now, I went back to being a teller. I was actually a backup head teller in the beginning. Then I went to part-time when they opened a part-time job. I retired after 28 years. Did I say that? I think I did.
When did you retire?
2006. But banking had changed, and I was thrilled to death to retire, get away from the bank. I always wanted to do something else, but I just never had an opportunity.
What do you want to say about the children?
We have 4 children, 1 girl and 3 boys, and our daughter Jan is in Montgomery. Our oldest son James is in Calera, and he's married and has 2 children. And our middle son Jeremy is presently in San Antonio teaching Latin. And our youngest son is still in Southside, where we lived in the Gadsden area, and he's married and has 3 children.
All right.
So we have 5 grandchildren altogether.
Any wisdom you want to pass down to future generations about life and family history?
Well, I know life is short. When I think about me being 70, I mean, it still startles me. I don't feel like I should be 70. And I just want to say that make the most of your time. Hopefully that everyone will remain a Christian. That's the most important thing. And just hope that family is important. And I just hope that all the kids and grandkids stay in touch and get together and be concerned about each other and not lose touch. And just hope that God's with this nation and somehow can be turned around at some point and go back to a God-fearing nation.
All right, well, I don't have anything else unless you want to talk anymore.
I think you've asked me everything.
Okay.
We through?
We're done.
Okay.